Hello, good afternoon, Scope Ministry Christian Fellowship Church. Once again, I am Minister Vincent Morgan, um, the Associate Minister at Scope Ministries Christian Fellowship Church here in Little Rock, Arkansas, where my co-laborers, Reverend Minister Johnny Walker and Minister Reginald Beasley, we co-labor in gospel together, where Pastor Elvin Jackson is the pastor of our great church. This week's lesson, I'm here to teach our Sunday school lesson again today. For this Sunday, June the 7th, is coming from is titled Listen Up. The unit one is Wisdom in Proverbs. And Solomon is our author here, main person speaking in today's lesson. And so we'll just jump into the lesson and get right to it. I'll be honest, I was a little kind of torn whether to teach this lesson or to do something different in light of all the things that are happening right now in our society, our country, with this global pandemic that's going on, that's been almost amplified by the uprising of the riots and looting and even the peaceful protests that are going on right now in our society. And I kind of thought about going from a different angle, but nonetheless, all scripture are given by inspiration of God. Okay, so let's get started. In the book of Proverbs, this first chapter, written by the human author Solomon, and we know Solomon. This entire book wasn't written by him. Some believe that Agar and King Lemuel wrote the last two books of Proverbs. But Proverbs was written by Solomon, the lesson that we're covering today. He is the king of David. He had he was the son of Bathsheba through David, or by David, and this young man assumed the kingdomship after his father had died, and still having some other brothers that were still there and are still alive. But as David was dying, his Bathsheba went to him and told him that you had promised this kingdomship to Solomon. So Solomon was inaugurated and he became king. And one day when he was in Gibeon, Solomon had a vision or had a dream. The Lord appeared to him. Jehovah appeared to Solomon, and he basically told Solomon. I think it's recorded in 1 Kings, the 3rd chapter. Basically asked him to ask whatever you want, and you being the new king, and I'll basically grant it for you. And Solomon exhibited some real good humility there. He, instead of asking for money and fame and honor and riches and health and prosperity, he simply basically asked for an understanding heart, for wisdom, so that he would be able to judge God's people, because he knew that his own skill wouldn't be suitable for the task of being able to judge God's people. And and I wish we see more of that today. I wish we really see more of that, of people realizing that we may have been successful in one part of life or whatever, but in order to run a godly nation, that we need God's help. And that's what Solomon did. This thing impressed God so much that God said, okay, wait a minute. You didn't ask for all this other stuff. You didn't ask for personal things for yourself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you this understanding heart. I'm going to give you this wisdom. I think in verse 12 that no one had before you or will have after you. I'm gonna give this to you, okay? But in addition to that, I'm gonna give you fame and honor. I'm gonna give you the riches and stuff. I'm gonna give you all these different things to it. So as long as you do one thing, he said, as long as you walk in the same statutes that your father David did. Now, granted, David was not perfect, and David did a lot of wrong. But God told him that he would keep these things, that as long as he did the things that David did, had the heart of David. So with that in mind, let's get started in our lesson today, okay? This book is written about 970 BC. It's before the fall of Israel. We know that Israel fell in 722 to the Assyrians. But this was doing when Solomon inherited the kingdom. He had some uprising by his brother. And he ended up having to have him put to death, and so did Joab. But when he inherited the kingdom, it was basically peaceful. And throughout his whole 40-year reign, this was a peaceful type of reign. He didn't have any wars. Matter of fact, his name Solomon means peaceful one. So it was a peaceful reign. And during that time, it had a lot of property. It was enjoying pretty much good prosperity at that time. It wasn't they wasn't going through a recession or depression. So Solomon he comes on the scene and he exhibits some wisdom right off the bat. After God gave him this wisdom, Scripture says that he went back down to Jerusalem, went up to Jerusalem, which Jerusalem was 6 miles south of Gibeon, and immediately he was approached by two harlots, and we know the story that they had the two women had children, had sons, and about 3 days apart, and one woman basically suffocated her baby by rolling on top of him, and got up in the middle of the night and switched him out and gave the other woman her dead baby and took the live baby. When the other woman woke up the next morning, she realized what was done, and they brought the situation to Solomon. And Solomon exhibited wisdom after women were fighting over the baby. He said, let's just cut the baby in half. And the lady whose baby it rightfully was said, wait a minute, no, let her have the baby. Let's not kill the baby. But the lady who had stolen the baby said, no, let's cut him in half. And Solomon said, no, let's give the baby to the other woman, because basically no mother would want their child cut in half. So that fame went out, and everybody recognized Solomon as this wise teacher, the wisest man that ever taught in Jerusalem, next to Jesus. So in verse 1, it says, in the Proverbs of Solomon, the son of David, King of Israel. I'm sorry, let me back up. This is Proverbs. It's in Proverbs, the first chapter. Our lesson covers verses 1 through 4, verses 7 through 8, verses 10 through 11, and verses 20 through 22, and 32 through 33. So we'll try to cover much as we possibly can, okay? But the Proverbs of Solomon, the son of David. And when I look at that, first of all, I look at the word Proverbs, and Proverbs is really just mean a generalized statement, right? It's a generalized statement. It means a comparison or similarities or to parallel something, okay? So he used a lot of similitudes, he used a lot of parables as he took real life situations and made a comparison and to teach, okay? So let's get started. So this is what Solomon said in that first verse. He is the king of Israel. Verse 2 says, to know wisdom and instruction, to perceive the words of understanding. He tells you right there in verse 2, this is the purpose of this from the king. It's coming from the wisest man at that time. It's coming from the wisest man. And he says that in order to be wise, is to know wisdom. The purpose of his teaching is to know wisdoms and instruction, to perceive the words of understanding. And I thought about that. So what does instruction mean? Instruction means to be disciplined, right? What is wisdom? Wisdom is to have skill, to know good, to have good judgment in making decisions. So, and I thought about that. Wisdom and skill. Wisdom doesn't necessarily come from education, from the university, right? But we know wise people that had never been to the university, but that wisdom, that skill, that skill in making good judgment and making the application. This is what Solomon said. That's the purpose of this, is to know wisdom and instruction, to have discipline. It's hard to have wisdom apart from instruction or discipline. To perceive the words of understanding. When I think about discipline, I think about how Michael Jordan was. Michael Jordan's probably the greatest basketball player that ever lived. And I remember the story that he didn't make his ninth grade basketball team. Can you imagine? And if you look at him now, looking back over history, you can imagine that he lacked the skill to make the team, but he practiced day and night. He disciplined himself to make sure that he could make the team the next year and to be the greatest, and the discipline that came along with it. The wisdom, the skill that he had was second to none in basketball. And this is what Solomon's saying. And to be successful and to have a good life we have to know wisdom and instruction. We have to have the skill and we have to have the discipline. Discipline without skill is meaningless. It's futile. To receive the instructions of wisdom, justice, and judgment, and equity. To receive these instructions, Solomon is saying that in order to receive instruction of wisdom and justice and judgment and equity, he is wanting to make sure that we treat everybody fairly. In this particular time, we see what's going on in light of the brutalities and some of the things that are going on in our society today. Makes you wonder if some of our leaders have ever read Proverbs or read any of the scripture. Instruction to how to use wisdom, how to use skill, have discipline, how to have justice, how to treat people equally, regardless of what you may think, regardless of how they look, regardless of how their economical background is, irregardless of their social status. To give subtlety to the simple, to the young man knowledge and direction. This is the purpose of this, he says, right? It's a game to teach the young people insight, the unlearned to gain insight on making good decisions. Making good decisions is paramount today, church. You can make 100 good decisions and do great, but you can make one wrong decision that can turn your life upside down. And Solomon is telling the teachers to teach, the wise people to teach the young people or the unlearned people about wisdom. And I say this. We think that wisdom is synonymous with age. I beg to differ. There are some foolish or some fools, older folks, right? Remember how Solomon got his wisdom. What did he do? He asked of God. I believe James says that. He asked of God and he put it to use. During Solomon's reign, during his reign for 40 years, like I said earlier, there were no wars at all. But when you look at his life, we have the ability now of being able to look back over his entire life, and we wonder how did he leave or lose the wisdom. So don't think that wisdom is always there for you. Remember, God told Solomon that he had to walk in the statutes of his father. And as long as he did this, he would have his wisdom, he would have his riches, he would have his honor and fame and everything. Verse number 8, it skips one. No, I'm sorry, it doesn't skip verse 7. Verse 7 says, This is the theme of the entire book of Proverbs. It says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instructions. The fear of the Lord. He's not saying to be scared of the Lord, or to be like you scared of a ghost or something. He says the fear, to be the respect, the reverence of God is the beginning of knowledge. You know what? If you don't have respect for the Lord, you don't even have the beginning. It's the beginning of knowledge. You know, some of us, we think that we're smarter than the Lord. You know, I struggle. I'll be honest with you. I struggle with this, not to bring politics in here. So I'm gonna forgo some of that. But some of us think that we're smarter than God. That we don't need to ask God for anything. We don't even need to ask God for forgiveness. But the fear of the Lord. Because why? Why don't we need to ask God? Because we don't fear the Lord. We don't respect Him. We don't reverence Him. And if we don't do that, Solomon said, you don't even have a beginning. But fools is who you are if you don't respect the Lord. But fools despise wisdom and instruction. Fools despise skill and discipline. And who is a fool? A fool is a person who said there's no God, right? This is what the wisest man said in the scripture. To submit to God, to honor God, to put nothing before Him. Verse number 8. My son, hear the instruction of thy father, and forsake not the law of thy mother. You know, children, if you want to be successful, if you want to have much in life, hearken to the teaching of your parents, and to your grandparents, to the older folks in your community. Hearken to them, listen to them. I know I've been a teenager, and I was a teenager among teenagers, and I was just like you. I thought I knew it all, and I thought what my parents and folk was telling me was back in their day, was back in the old times. But I did listen and hearken to some of the things that I was taught. And I knew that there was a line in life that you just didn't cross. And I thank God for that in my life from the folks that taught it to me. Not saying that I didn't make mistakes. Oh, absolutely I do. Anyone that know anything about me know I do. So I don't. I'm not trying to come across in a manner that I'm so wise and I'm so perfect that I don't have any mistakes. My life is littered with them. But I realize there's a line that we just don't cross. And I do reverence and fear the Lord in all things. All right, verse number, it goes from verse 8, it skips 9, but it says, let me back up to 8. It said, hear the instruction of thy father. You know, the first teachers in your life should be your parents, should be your mothers and your fathers. You know, so many times in today, the first teachers in our children's lives are the people at the school, at the daycare, at kindergarten, or at Head Start or the pre-K program. Those are the first teachers. That's not that child's fault. That's the parent's fault. That parent should have taught that child and have a responsibility. And when the child goes to school, the school just adds to what has already been taught. They teaching book knowledge, but we should have been instilling wisdom and instruction in our children way before they even attend kindergarten. Hear the instruction of thy father, and forsake not the law of thy mother. I remember some of the things that I was taught at home, and when I got to school, I knew not to go that direction because I had been taught this from my parents and from my grandparents. You know, it's so much better to teach ahead of time than to come back afterwards and try to teach something before they have already been faced with these issues, with these peer pressures. Look what it says. My son, if sinners entice thee, consent thou not. In other words, let me put it in layman's terms. He says, if sinful people come to you, don't entice them, don't embrace them. And I'll go a step further. Not no if, it's when. It's not a matter if sin's gonna come to your door. Sin is gonna come. As a matter of fact, you brought sin to your door. Why are you a sinner? You're not a sinner because you commit sins. You are a sinner because you are born a sinner. And it's evidence that you were born a sinner because you do commit sins. You were born in sin. You were fashioned. You were shapen in iniquity. You were conceived in sin. You were a sinner when you were born. You were just a newborn sinner. And as you got older, it manifested itself in the different sins that you committed. But so when sinners come to your door, he says, my son, don't entice them. I remember when my parents would tell us about don't do drugs and stuff and don't drink. I was first approached with tobacco in the 6th grade. I remember kids on the soccer field offered me a chew of tobacco. Why? Why did I not entice this? Was because I had already been taught that. Verse 11 says, if they say, come with us, let us lay wait for blood. Let us lurk privately for the innocent without cause. You know, there are some folk that are just waiting to pounce on folks that they perceive to be weak or to be different than them. And he says, and Solomon says, the wisest teacher said, don't go with them. Don't go with them. You know, they're in our society today, if a leader says something, and some of us know right from wrong, but they just go along with it anyway. Irregardless of what they've been taught, irregardless of what they know, they just go along with it and they just wait privately to pounce on people, to ambush somebody. And Solomon said, don't be a part in it. You know, in the law world, that's called an accomplice. An accomplice is just as guilty as the person that actually did it. You helped him accomplish whatever he set out to do. So if you go along with him, Solomon saying is you are accompanying them. You're an accomplice. You are helping them accomplish their mission. All right. Then it skips from verse 10 and 11 and jumps all the way down to verse 20. And I encourage you to read this entire chapter. There's some good things in this chapter, you know, and really there's some wise sayings. There's some good sayings. There are some good things in here, and it would do us all some good. Wisdom, verse 20 says, wisdom cried without. She uttered her voice in the streets. She cried in the chief place of concourse, in the openings of the gates, in the city she uttered her words, saying, he's talking about in the marketplace. If you know anything about Solomon, you know that Solomon was big on commerce. He the one brought in this trade deal. He had merchants that would go out and look for gold and silver. Some of them would take the ships out and went as far as West Spain, and they would be gone for 3 years at a time. And at one point, they had brought back over $12 million worth of gold. And he learned how to trade. He learned how to have agreements with other different nations. And they would meet and they would talk about these things and a lot of things that was going on. And at the openings of the gates, he says she uttered her words, saying, you can hear a lot of things. You can learn a lot of wise wisdom in these areas. And this is what Solomon was trying to instill in the people. In other words, put yourself in the place where wisdom is taught. And I'm going to tell you, it's not taught in the club. As a matter of fact, it's not even taught in the government. As we look today and we see all the stuff that's going on, there couldn't be no wisdom there. You know, put yourself in the right area. Verse number 22 says, how long, ye simple ones, will ye love simplicity, and the scorners delight in the scorning, and the fools hate knowledge. How long will this go on? How long will we stay in this position? How long will we allow this to go on? Do you ever want better? Do you ever want to change? What's going on? How long did this have to happen? Not listening to wisdom ends up in disaster. Look at what's going on around us right now. Just turning a blind eye to everything. As we look at the rioting and everything that was going on, it's been this is pent up frustration. I don't justify, I don't condone looting or any type of violence towards any other person, towards any other property, whether you be black, white, whatever your racial or ethnic makeup may be, your social economical background. I don't indulge in condone that by no means, and neither does Scope Ministry Christian Fellowship Church. But what we do see is that this is pent up stuff, and folks have been tired for so long, and maybe some of the people are going about the wrong way, trying to accomplish the mission. Peaceful protesting, I can understand that, and I support that. I condone that. That's part of your constitutional right as a citizen. But look how long should this go on? How long that and finally the people have risen up, and right now we're going through a lot. And the scorners delight in the scorning, and fools hate knowledge. You know, you can't. Somebody told me once before, you can't tell a fool anything. You know, we all know that person that you can't tell anything. They know everything. They have knowledge about something, have some knowledge about everything that happens in life. We don't have all the answers. Just because you're successful in one area of life doesn't mean that you have all the answers to what's going on now. For the turning away of the simple shall slay them, and the prosperity of fools shall destroy them. You know, we just for the almighty dollar, we'll do a lot of things. We'll allow a lot of stuff to happen. We say there are over 100, I think it said 107,000 lives have been lost right now as a result of this coronavirus that has in the United States alone. I'm sorry, that 107,000 lives have been lost already due to this virus, and some people are profiting and making money off of this. I talked about it last week that the government said that if people try to price gouge during this time, turn them in because it's illegal. And fools will try to destroy folks and make money off of the misfortune of others. But whosoever hearken unto me shall dwell safely, and shall be quiet from fear of evil. In other words, Solomon saying that hearken to these words that we're teaching, and you should live a safe life. Let me say this: just because you're wise doesn't mean that you would wisdom begets prosperity. The Bible doesn't teach that. The Bible doesn't teach that because we become children that we will have prosperity, financial money. You know, we talked about that once before, that Paul said, for such teaching flee. But it also teaches that Solomon is saying that those those fools those evildoers will eventually get their just deserts. That God will reward those evildoers for that evil that they have done. Wisdom. And I say this here, and I will, as we close out with this, I wonder why Solomon left all that wisdom that he had, all that teaching, all the knowledge he had, that God gave him that he had given no other. As we know later on in Solomon's life, before he died, he had brought his many different wives and concubines into the temple's ground, and he had even allowed them to. He gave them. Afforded them the lifestyle that he had, the lifestyle of the rich and famous. In addition to doing that, he brought in their worshiping, their idol gods, and he even himself did that. And he had lost a lot. He really, in essence, he really had almost really become a disgrace. But he left the teaching, he had left the wisdom, he had left the skill that he had. So many of us have started out in this journey and have become perplexed or become weary, have become disheartened, and had left what we have been taught. And what we are trying to encourage you to do today is stick with it. Stick with the Lord. Stick with the fear of God. Solomon said, for the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Remember that. In spite of what we're going through, in spite of what's going on today, remember what we've been taught. This word, the book of Proverbs, there's not this word doesn't mean that every person will do this and will have the same type of results. They're general statements. But usually what will happen is if we follow the precepts in this particular book, wisdom and instruction, we can live a lot more peaceful life. Once again, I'm Minister Vincent Morgan of the Scope Ministry Christian Fellowship Church, where Reverend Elvin Jackson is our pastor at 9400 Hilaro Springs Road, right here in Little Rock, Arkansas. We encourage you to come be a part of us. Right now, we are having only Sunday morning service. It's starting at 10:45 a.m. We ask that you come out and be a part of us. We are social distancing, and we are wearing masks that are required for us. And come out, be a part of us. We look forward to seeing you there. And may God bless you, and may God keep you all is our prayers. Thank you.